can answer that question. He's Jon Mozes of the Altoona Curve, who joins us courtesy of Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm, best personal injury lawyer, 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. John, what's it like in Richmond right now?
Well, today we've got a high of about 84 degrees with sunshine. Humidity is up a little bit, but it's one of those days where you're sort of thinking to yourself, it could be a lot hotter, and it's not, and we like that.
Yeah. If I leave now, I could get there for tonight's game.
You probably could. Yeah. And all you would do is see a Curve team that's hot and on the playoff hunt and playing some good baseball right now.
Yeah. Well, speaking of hot, how about Termarr this week?
Boy, 3 straight multi-hit games. Love to see it. It's been a long time coming. I think for some time here we sort of took for granted what Termarr was. He's still only 21 years old. And, I think it just takes some time for guys to sort of get used to that at this level. So he's starting to figure it out. Last 11, 12 games have been pretty encouraging here. So that's a huge boost for Altoona here the last 3-4 weeks of the season.
Yeah, well, they always talk about the hit tool with guys, and they've always talked about Termarr having a great hit tool, but sometimes you got to figure out how to use that tool, and it seems like he is really starting to hone it in.
Yeah, it does take a little bit of time to sort of get your feet underneath you at this level. You've got guys that have elite velocity, and they can command their breaking stuff in a way that hitters aren't really used to before they get to Double-A. So, one thing I love about Termarr is that it seems like he has settled in this week as a guy that's just going to spray line drives all over the ballpark. He bunts. He has like a couple of bunt hits already this week because, the defense is playing him for pull power. And that opens up, big spaces on the left side of the infield. He bunted his way aboard. A really cool moment in the opener of this series, or in Wednesday night's game. We had guys on first and second, nobody out in the first inning. Termarr lays down a bunt. It gets past the pitcher. Shortstop picks it up. The catcher goes out to get it, Pat calling off his pitcher. And then there's nobody covering home. So Mitch Jebb, sprints all the way around the bases and scores from second base on a bunt.
I was going to ask
really, really cool stuff.
I was going to ask you about that because you read it and you say, well, how did that develop? What actually occurred to make that happen? Sounds like a really heads-up play by Mitch, huh?
Yeah, it's, that's one thing that sort of jumps out at you when you watch Mitch Jebb play baseball, that he is always thinking the game, and he has such great speed that when he sees a base is uncovered in front of him, he just says, you know what, I'm faster than whatever fielder is in the same neighborhood here, so I'm going to go get a base. I'm going to go take another base on this play, score a run. His energy is really unmatched.
Yeah, Mitch Jebb always feels like he's going to get there. That's pretty amazing. Does Termarr, does he remain with the Curve through the rest of this month, or you think he's on his way to Indy very soon?
I think it's pretty solid that he'll be with Altoona to finish the rest of the season here.
Oh, good.
I know that, it would be great for Termarr's individual career, if he performs well enough to push to AAA. I think they're looking for a little bit more consistency before they consider a promotion for him to AAA. But also, this team's in the thick of the playoff race. Termarr is a guy that's, had his imprint all over this club for the whole season. And, I think there's something to be said for, keeping a group of guys together that have been together all season and, in the trenches together, if you will. So I think there's a pretty good chance that Termarr will be here to finish the year.
Now, that being said, about continuity of the roster and everything, there have been a number of new guys making the trip north from Greensboro to Altoona.
Yeah, we got 2 new relief pitchers this week, Mike Walsh and Landon Tompkins, guys who were really effective at Greensboro this year, especially in the second half of the year. We'll see how those guys do. They both, were sort of walked a tightrope in their first outing at Double-A this week at Richmond. And it's just hard to measure up guys coming from high A may not be as good as the guys you're losing, right? Like Wilkin Ramos and Ryan Harbin, who both got promoted to AAA before this week's series. Mm-hmm. Those guys are absolute nails out of the bullpen. You felt really good whenever those two guys came in the game that, your team was gonna hold the lead. So I think that's sort of what's going to be interesting here for the Curve, right? They had a really deep bullpen for a couple weeks in a row with Ramos and Harbin and Benoit and Bo Burrows, and, three of those guys are now on the AAA roster. So You just have less options at the end of games now.
Harbin didn't last long in Altoona at all. I mean, he came from Greensboro, stopped, did his laundry, and off he was to Indianapolis.
Yeah, pretty much. And, it can be that way with relievers sometimes, right? Harbin's had a lengthy injury history his first couple of years as a pro, and he's got a mentality that really fits for the bullpen. He's got sort of a low heartbeat, where he never really gets sped up. And he's also got the stuff, like, you're talking about a 98-mile-an-hour average fastball velocity. That's the kind of thing you're looking for at the end of a game. He's got a very good slider. So, it really wouldn't surprise me if Ryan Harbin ends up at Pittsburgh for the last week of the season. I mean, with the way he's throwing the ball, he's free agent after the year. He's a guy that, I think is probably going to get added to the 40-man roster after the season. Mm-hmm. Just because he has such elite stuff that it's going to play in the big leagues.
Yeah. Mike Jarvis gets a little taste of AAA too. How about that?
Yeah, good for Mike. He's sort of been in a bit of a challenging role this year where, he's a guy that fills in a spot whenever there's open opportunity at AA or AAA. And, with the Pirates having to put O'Neal Cruz on the injured list this week, Mike Jarvis is the trickle-down effect. Ronnie Simon goes to the big leagues, and they needed another guy who could play outfield and be a strong utility man on that bench at Indianapolis. So off he goes. That's a guy that might end up back with Altoona once the roster gets healthy.
Yeah, it'll be good to see him come back, because a guy like that helps as you are approaching the possibility of a postseason. Are the Curve players talking about that at all? That there is the possibility that they could make it in to the Eastern League postseason?
Absolutely. I talked to Mike Walsh, who's one of the new relievers that we received earlier this week, and he was like, we're all locked in. We know what's in front of us here. Getting to the playoffs and winning the championship is the goal. It's interesting that in the Pirates minor league system, each of the top three affiliates, Indianapolis, Altoona, and Greensboro, are all in the thick of a playoff race right now. So at all three levels, you got guys that are pushing to win. And, that is a little bit different from typical minor league experiences. You and I both know that, usually you're focused on development. The wins and losses, don't mean as much, but these guys are competitive, and, they want something to play for at the end of the year here. So, that's very much been a motivating factor for the team this week in Richmond, because they know they're playing the team right behind them in the standings. And if they win 4 or 5 games this week, they've got a chance to sort of create a little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that could really make a difference for these guys. And the Pirates certainly are watching that sort of thing. To do it as they are at all three of those levels, even while there's roster upheaval, because guys are moving up, guys are moving out, and then they're coming back. And it's not the easiest way to approach a baseball season when you don't know where you're going to be playing 2 days from now. But they're all handling it seems, very, very well. And they're going to handle it back home in Altoona next week.
Yeah, should be a really fun and interesting series. The Reading Fighting Phils are coming in. I know there are a lot of Phillies fans that, come to see us when Reading comes into town. Just with the way the 6-game schedules have worked, we don't see them every year because they're in the other division. So it'll be Reading's first visit to Altoona since the last week of the season in 2022. The Fighting Phils have a couple of top Phillies prospects. Aiden Miller is a guy that, could be on the Major League radar for Philadelphia in the next year or two. He's a speed demon who hits everything in sight. So he's with Reading right now. And, it ought to be interesting from a baseball perspective this coming week because, as we've been talking about, the Curve are right in the thick of a playoff race, 2.5 games up in the division with 27 games left in the second half. And, these guys are going to be pretty pumped up to come in and win some games on their home field.
Absolutely. And not a whole lot of chances left for fans to see the Altoona Curve beyond with the regular season coming to a close. Hopefully it does include playoffs. But for fans next week, it's the chances are dwindling. You got to get out and see the Curve play ball.
Yeah, this is sort of the perfect week before you get back into school mode. We're going to be home every night, Tuesday through Sunday, 6 o'clock games, post-game fireworks Tuesday night, post-game fireworks Sunday night. We've got specialty jerseys lined up. We've got our pro wrestling night with Ted DiBiase is going to come out and make a special appearance. I believe that's Saturday. This week you're going to see a lot of the cool stuff going on in Curve, PA.
He's the $1 million man. Yeah, so he is. And so is Jon Mozes, who is with the Altoona Curve in Richmond this week, back in Altoona next week. Don't you want to just go and glance up there at the broadcast booth and see Jon Mozes? Sure you do. Enjoy the golf this weekend and enjoy the Altoona Curve, John. We'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, my friend. Have a great weekend.
You too. There's Jon Mozes, the Altoona Curve. They're playing Richmond, a really key series. You get a win tonight. You've got 3 wins already, and you are rolling here through